Hey, it's Klayton, and welcome to episode 37 of Ask Klayton. You might be thinking, I've never heard of Ask Klayton before, so how could this be episode 37? Well, it was Ask Celldweller, it was Ask Circle of Dust. We decided to make things a lot easier for you, not only with this segment, but across the entire YouTube channel. So this segment where you get to ask me questions from now on will be called Ask Klayton, and you can ask me about any of my projects or anything that I do, which makes things a lot easier for you and for us. So we took that idea across the entire YouTube channel and simplified everything. So there are new icons for Celldweller, Circle of Dust, Scandroid, Gear in Production, and Ask Klayton. This will help you navigate the channel much more clearly and simply and find the content you want.
Dude.
Yes! You're like, oh, don't choke, don't choke. Dude, I can't even get past my first name.
That was so good.
So since I haven't done this for a while, and you've got a bunch of questions I need to answer, why don't I just give you some updates on what I'm working on before we jump into your questions. Let's start with Scandroid. I'm wrapping up a full-length Scandroid album that will be released this year, 2016 or 2516, depending on what point in time you live in. Circle of Dust. Many of you know this is my first real musical project, and I have recently bought back all the rights to my original albums and have been remastering, re-releasing with a ton of extra content, all of those albums, 5 in total. The last one, which is Disengage, will be released on October 14th, and I am also currently wrapping a brand new Circle of Dust album, all new material, super heavy, you will be happy. That comes out 2016. Celldweller. Many of you have asked, including Joanna Infante here, will there be new Celldweller or Scandroid like this comment in the future? The answer is yes to both, but Celldweller related. Soundtrack of the Voices in My Head Volume 3 is coming out. Let me explain to you what that is. Factions from my End of an Empire album were stylistically meant to live in the same space as Soundtrack for the Voices in My Head. But because they were attached to a vocal album, I realized people may have missed their original intention. So to make it more obvious, I'm re-releasing these along with the 4 original songs from Chapter 1 of SVH03 and a brand new single, Mission to Mercury, to complete Soundtrack of the Voices in My Head Volume 3, which is out September 2nd. And in more Celldweller news, when I wrap up the Scandroid album and the new Circle of Dust album, I will be working on the next Celldweller release. For those of you interested in gear and production, you'll see this cool green icon that represents everything related to the gear I use and how I produce. I'm also working on a video educational course for later this year to teach you my production tricks. And while we're talking about gear and production, let's talk about my company, Refractor Audio, my hardware software company. My first sample-based instrument transport is out. I just released volume 1 of my guitar and bass sample pack. You can go pick that up. And by the time you see this video, my first volume of a modular sample pack will be out as well. As for my clothing company, Outland, there's new stuff on the way. Also, for those who don't know, there is a brand new site up with every piece of information you want to find out about me and my projects, Klayton.info. And if you go to Klayton.info/playlists, there are a ton of playlists there for your listening pleasure, all kinds of albums and feels. So I hope this gives you more clarity on the redesign of the YouTube channel and makes your life a lot easier. So with no further ado, let's jump into your questions.
Hey Klayton, it's Walter from Japan. Yeah, let me ask you something. Sure, I know your work like Celldweller and your music, but I have been listening to Circle of Dust stuff, and that time you are really more rock, metal band. You can't hear too much electronic stuff there, synthesized I think a little bit just. But when you became Celldweller, everybody knows you made this beautiful fusion of rock and electronic music. The question is, what happened to you so you change your mind for go more to electronic stuff? You're always liked electronic music back in time, or something happened you start to go more to club and electronic parties? That is it.
Hello again, Walter from Japan. And that's a very interesting question because when I was doing Circle of Dust, I thought it was very electronic. And it actually really was. If you compared Circle of Dust to a lot of the metal bands of the time, they were just guitar, bass, and drums, and Circle of Dust was almost all electronic except for guitars and vocals. And it may not have been as obvious because I wasn't using synthesizers, mainly because I couldn't afford them. So I used a lot of sounds and samples to create these musical landscapes that I was making. And then all my drums were programmed. There were almost no live drums on those albums. That's just what I was into at the time. But at the end of Circle of Dust, I started listening to a lot of European music like drum and bass and psychedelic trance. And that's what really got me into more modern production and wanting to use more synthesizers. And that was the fusion that became Celldweller. So I've always viewed myself as a mixture of electronic and rock, although the style has changed over the years. That is a tough question because there's a lot of movies coming out that I'd love to be part of. But I think if I had my choice of a few, it would certainly be Blade Runner 2, King Kong vs. Godzilla, which is slated for 2020. I think that's going to be big. And although it's not a TV show, it's being adapted by Netflix into a series, but it's a book series that Brett, aka Blue Stolly, turned me onto, which was awesome. And it's called Altered Carbon. And if you haven't read it, please do.
Hey Klayton, it's Liko again. First off, like everyone else has said before me in the past videos, thanks for all the music and the videos you've been making. They just keep getting better and better.
Thank you, Liko. And please send me your manager's information so I can hire you to be on my next album.
I have only 3 questions once again. The first is going to be a little more technical. What sort of vocal effects do you like the most, or what do you think is the best kind of effect, at least for the music that you make?
Well, I'd love to say Darth Vader is my favorite vocal effect, but I don't want to piss you off. So I think the next logical answer for me would be the vocoder. I've always loved the vocoder, and I still completely love the vocoder, to the point where I've spent a lot of money on expensive old vocoders because they sound really great. That is by far my favorite vocal effect.
My second question is, if you could have any other language to sing for the Celldweller project or for Circle of Dust, etc., what would it be and why?
I've always thought maybe Dothraki would be a cool language to sing in, but if you've seen Game of Thrones and you've heard the Dothraki speak, it's a really difficult language, so I'm not even going to bother.
And the last one is, why was Fixed Remix pulled down in 2012 or 2011? It was like very fun to make remixes, and it kind of was a bummer when the site was pulled down. Was it for updates, or like why was it in hiatus for such a long time? It's great to see the site back again, and I can't wait to see what other people will be making. Thank you for answering. Have a great day.
I agree with you. It was a lot of fun. The community was great, and there were a lot of great producers that came up through that. But it was eating up a lot of resources and time internally, so we had to basically put it aside for a while and focus on building some other things. Well, that's pretty simple. It was a one-off project that I did, one album I did with my friend Buka while I was doing Circle of Dust. I brought in a bunch of friends as guests, and then I just had a lot of fun locking myself in my studio and making this album. Fun trivia fact, that is the first album I ever made where I went from a day job to full-time music.
Hey Celldweller, Lila here. First of all, I want to say I love you, and I love your music, and I love your hairstyle. How do you make your hairstyle to stay in shape? Thanks. Rock on, man.
Hi Lila, I love you too. And the answer is very easy. It's this guy.
Hey, so out of all the music I listen to, you guys probably remind me the most of space exploration, sci-fi type stuff. So I guess my question for you, my biggest question at least, was do you have a favorite sci-fi series or novel or anything? Thanks.
Well, Matthew, I probably have more than I can actually talk about in this answer, but there's a few that I certainly do love that are more recent. So I read the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey, and I love them. And they had ended up adapting that into a TV show called The Expanse, which is on the Sci-Fi Channel. I highly recommend that. Another book series that I'm almost done reading is by Richard Morgan. And the first book, called Altered Carbon, is being adapted by Netflix to be a series. So keep an eye out for that. I'm really excited about it. So many of you have been asking about Stutter, and I haven't said anything, but the reason you haven't seen him lately is because I've had to put him down. But don't worry, I filmed the whole thing. Let's take a look. You know, you're a bad cat. You meow too much, you eat too much food, you smack me in the face with your tail in the middle of the night and wake me up. You know what? Your mama was an alley cat. Thanks for sticking all the way through this episode of Ask Klayton. As always, subscribe to my channel because there's lots of cool stuff coming. Like or share this video. And I want your questions in on next month's episode of Ask Klayton. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. Ask your question in the comments below. Hashtag Ask Klayton on your social media platform of choice. Or film yourself and submit it by hitting this link in the moon and get your pretty face on my channel. Until next time, this is Klayton, aka Celldweller, signing off.